Hi, everybody. I'm back today with another 1980s arcade cabinet tribute. A while back, I made a video about Bally Midway's Demolition Derby, and I said if I had $1 million, I'd try to build my own old school arcade. And if I had to put a limit on the number of cabinets I had, say like 100 machines, Demo Derby would be one of them just because it was so fun to play. Well, another one would have to be Capcom's 1942, which came out in 1984. So when I was in grade four in public school, I first saw 1942 in a Towers shopping center, and I remember it being in the entrance part where they kept all the shopping buggies. So it was that and something like Miss Pac-Man outside, almost exposed to the elements where it could get all beat up and everything. Anyway, at the time, graphically, it looked good, and I was instantly fascinated with the idea and gameplay. It's a vertical scrolling shooter with a Pacific Theater Second World War theme, and I'd never seen anything like it. Remember, this is 1984. The P-38 Lightning Super Ace plane was something any kid would want to pilot. And he didn't necessarily associate it with the Pacific at the time, but what a great choice by the designer. You could power up, you could roll out of danger, you could get escort fighters, and most importantly, you could fight at least, I don't know, like 5 or 6 different kinds of enemy planes. Each level was a bit different from the next. The enemy would behave differently. There were bonus levels, there were Easter eggs, everything that would eventually set the standard for top down scrollers going forward. It was very commercially successful. It spawned a whole series of subsequent 1940X sequels. 1943, for example, was totally amazing, but you really needed two people to play it at the same time. And there's another reason why I fondly remember 1942. So over the years, it became my game. What I mean by this is like everyone back in the day who went to arcades came to associate certain people with specific titles. They were always playing their favorite cabinet. They owned the highest scores. They were the best at it in their town. To arcade people, they were the game. You sort of became the title. For example, I knew Gauntlet guys. They tended to be older mostly. Bubble Bobble guys. There were Double Dragon guys. And the most extreme example of this effect I knew was a Shinobi guy of all things. Like he was randomly a million times better at it than anybody else that I saw. And so I became the 1942 guy, but that was 40 years ago. I'm not that anymore. I can't even hardly play. But I remember being in grade 9, so 5 years after I first saw 1942 for the first time. And I had gotten kicked out of math class, and it wasn't even my fault. Like the teacher had his back turned to the class, and somebody said something or whatever. But the teacher thought it was me when he turned around, and so he just kicked me out. So I got my stuff and left. I really didn't care at all. I remember it was the winter, so I got my winter jacket on and just walked out of the school uptown to a local VHS rental store because it had like 6 or 7 arcade games in the back. It was a place called Barn Burner, I remember, and it had an old 1942 machine. I think the only other thing that I remember it had was one of those pinball machines with the police lights, like high speed or something, one of those awesome ones. So I dropped a quarter into 1942, and for the first time in my life, the only time, I finished an arcade game just on one quarter. So eventually, I remember you got to a part where you're flying over Tokyo, so it's like a city underneath the plane instead of the islands. I think it might be the last 2 or 3 boards. You fly over Japan, but then you clear the last board, and the game says, we surrender or we give up or something like that. And nowadays, I can only hope to, get save my high scores and incrementally try to get a little bit better each time. I'm limited though because I don't have a joystick. I'm playing off a laptop keyboard with mushy tiny keys. So yeah. Anyway, I think 1942 was just so fascinating to me. Anyway, Capcom in general, I think, were great innovators in the video game industry. And playing 1942 in arcades will always be a fond memory for me. It would definitely, like I said before, be in my personal collection if I ever did have one. So yeah, and you can see there when you land on a carrier with a P-38 after a board, it says like the location of where you are midway you start. I think the next set of boards is like Rabaul, if I remember correctly. One of the later ones is Truck, yeah, and then it's eventually Tokyo. But yeah, I'm just not able to play well at all these days with without proper controls, and my reflexes aren't what they used to be. But just messing around with these old emulators is just so much fun. It brings back so many memories. Can't imagine what 1984 Peter would think if eventually all of these games could be, you could just play them forever at home on a personal computer. Yeah, it's another reason why I love the internet. Anyway, yeah, here's the one Easter egg. It's Capcom's signature like umbrella power up there. I died. Oh well. But I'm happy I got my new personal high score. I cleared like 2 levels. But you get the idea. I think anyone who watches this video knows 1942. I mean, for a time, it would just be impossible for me to walk past that machine without putting a quarter in. I don't think it ever happened after I first played it. Every time I saw it, I couldn't resist. Love that video game. Anyway, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more content coming soon.